And hello, this is Daniel Lawrence Smith, Associate Director of Training for Out and Equal Workplace Advocates. I'd like to welcome you all to our May 2015 monthly town call on SelfID, then and now. This is a broadcast audio call, so you should be listening to the audio on speakers or a headset with your computer. If you have any trouble accessing, please visit www.readytalk.com and use access code 694-6521. Again, 694-6521 at readytalk.com. A few more housekeeping notes. In your left-hand corner, you should have a chat window, so if you have any questions or problems, go ahead and message those in. If you have questions for the presenters as we're going through the session, go ahead and put those in. We'll flag them and answer them at the end of the webinar. Moving on, a few announcements for Out and Equal. On June 15th, we will have the second portion of our Train the Trainer program, and that will be at 10 a.m. That is a three-part series where we enable individuals just like yourselves to go out and train on best practices for diversity and inclusion in the workplace. On June 17th, we will have our June monthly town call, and it's going to delve into whether or not corporations should keep domestic partner benefits now that we see an increase in same-sex marriage throughout the United States. That will be at 12 p.m. Pacific on June 17th. June 22nd will be our third part of our Train the Trainer series at 10 a.m. Pacific. On June 23rd, Out and Equal will be participating in the LGBT Workplace Equality Institute, which is a day-long joint venture with our friends at the Walt Disney Company, and that will take place in Orlando. For more information, go ahead and visit that link at Eventbrite, and that will also allow you to register. And then, of course, October 5th through 8th is our 2015 Out and Equal Workplace Summit in Dallas, Texas. And just a reminder that our ultra early bird pricing will end on May 31st, so right around the corner. So go ahead and visit us online to find out registration information. And then we are now on a Salesforce Communities platform, which will allow you to connect and collaborate with people participating in this call today in our Community of Practice Forum, our Trainers Forum, and of course our regional affiliates throughout the United States. With that said, I'll go ahead and move over to our presenters. We're very fortunate to have a great group of panelists today, and I'll allow them to make introductions, starting first with Tim Jarman on the left, and then we'll move over to Monica.
Thanks, Daniel. Hi, everybody. I'm Tim Jarman. I'm Assistant Director for Diversity and Inclusiveness for EY's UK and Ireland practice. And LGBT issues and employee self-identification are two of the things that fall within my remit in the team. Thank you.
And Ken?
Hi, this is Ken Warner. I'm the Senior Advisor of the Office of Global Diversity for Chevron Corporation in San Ramon, California, and it's great to be here today.
Thank you, Ken. Annette?
Hi, everyone. Annette Coffey here. I'm a director at IBM and managing our Human Resources Technology Solutions. Delighted to be involved with our session today.
And Monica.
Good afternoon. I'm excited as well to be here. My name is Monica Marquez, and I'm the West Region Inclusiveness and Flexibility Leader here in the Americas on Ernst & Young. So very similar remit to Tim, my colleague who sits over in the UK. And I think we'll have an interesting kind of dynamic here between Tim and I where, we partnered really closely with Tim as they rolled out their self-ID process in UK before we did here in the US. And so we've kind of borrowed some of the best practices that Tim will be sharing with you all as well. And we can tell you the nuances that we leveraged here in the Americas. So looking forward to sharing that info with you.
That's wonderful. Thank you all, and we're so grateful for your participation. And that's who we are. So let's find out who we have on the call. So we have a poll here, and you can go ahead and click in a box that applies to you. So looking to see who is LGBT, queer, genderqueer, an ally, or other. And you can go ahead and put in all that apply. Okay, we're at about 50% participation. We'll give it just another moment or two here. And let's see where we're looking. Okay, so we've got a good mix of folks. It's always good to see a broad spectrum of diversity on this list. A few more coming in. Great, thank you for your input. And now talking specifically about self-ID, let's ask, does your company do LGBT self-ID tracking? And again, this is a place where you can select any that apply. So yes, survey only, yes, HR records only, yes, both survey and HR records, tracking domestic partner benefits, ERG, BRG member records, or other. And if there's other, please chat that in. And there's a few people texting in that no, they don't have anything in place, and thank you for that. We should have included that in the survey, but that's always good to know as well. And let's go ahead and take a look at our results. Okay, so again, we're seeing a broad spectrum within the questions, and then some people identifying that there are no practices currently in place. Okay, wonderful. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Tim to begin his portion on EY and self-ID.
Thanks, Daniel. I'm just going to quickly do a bit of an intro into why you would self-ID and the different methods of doing so, and some of the benefits that you get from good employee data as to why it's great to do this. For those of you that have heard me speak at the Workplace Summit in the past, some of this will be familiar to you, but the reasons for doing it don't really change. So that's why I'll be reiterating some of it. So, you know, why self-ID? Why would we ask our workforces to self-identify, whether that's through whatever method? I think it's largely, we're all in agreement that we want to do this to drive change. It's not something we're just doing so that we can tick a box to say, yep, we ask our staff self-identification questions. There's no point doing it if you're not going to use the data to affect change within your organization. So for us at EY, and hopefully many of you that do this as well, it's kind of a circle of positivity. Like it's there to help reinforce the action you're taking. So the first step is to self-ID, to go out there and monitor your employees. And monitor is a specific term that we use over here in the UK, but that's what we're talking about, self-ID. So monitor your staff, go out there, ask them the question, get the information back, analyze it, reflect on it. What's it telling you? Is it highlighting any issues that are coming up within, whether it's through an employee staff satisfaction survey, your people telling you that one section of your workforce is particularly unhappy. So if all your LGBT people are saying they're unhappy with a particular thing, but all your straight people are saying they're not happy, what's going on? Is there's some issues there? If on an HR system, if you're losing all of your people from a particular part of the business and from a particular community, something's happening. What's going on there? So you reflect on the results, see what they're telling you, and see where there are issues. Then you take action. You go and actually implement things, whether it's initiatives, programs, or whatever in that particular area. But then once you've done that, you need to find out what the impact has been. And so you need to remonitor, and you need to make sure that your data is up to date and that you keep going out and asking the questions to make sure, through attrition and things like that you still have a robust amount of information. And then it all begins again, reflect. Has it made a difference? Has the action you've taken actually affected change? And if not, you need to take some more action. So it's kind of it helps reinforce. It's a cycle. And there are different methods for self-identification. So at recruitment stage, job application stage, you can ask the questions as people are applying to your organization. And when they're in your organization, you can ask the questions on your HR system, which connects it to the person's name, when we'll get on to later in the call issues around that. There are all staff employee attitude surveys, staff satisfaction surveys, which are often anonymous, so you can ask on those. Sometimes your ERGs, your employee resource groups and networks, might send out surveys to their own members. That's a form of self-identification and can help inform their strategies and their initiatives. And then there are one-off data gathering surveys. So your organization might not self-ID regularly on general staff employment attitude surveys, and it may not do it on the HR system, but every now and then it may feel that it needs to go out and specifically ask self-identification questions in a one-off survey just to do a snapshot of the organization. So that's another method of doing it. The benefits of self-identification, well, it's a visible sign to your people that you want to know you want to understand the makeup of your people, and by including things like sexual orientation, gender identity, you are publicly and quite explicitly showing them that you really care about that as an issue, and you want to understand the makeup of your people by that demographic and other demographics that you might wish to add. It provides you with options or with opportunities to analyze your entire workforce, so promotion rates, your leavers, your performance review rating distributions, your new joiners, representation through your organization at all your different grades. So it really enables you, and this is on specifically the HR system, it really enables you to get to the grips of the makeup of your people. And on your staff satisfaction surveys, it enables you to get a much deeper understanding of what your people are trying to tell you through their responses, so through your broader understanding of your employees' points of view. And then good employee data is so powerful at helping to build the wider business case for diversity and inclusiveness within your organization, whether it's LGBT specific or just in general. So here are some figures from external research that EY has connected in with around the benefits that an organization of investing in diversity and inclusiveness for an organization, and this comes out of the sorts of data that you would be collecting through SelfID. So for organizations that rate highly for diversity and inclusiveness, they show much higher team collaboration rates, much higher retention rates, improved market share, and they're more likely to be successful in new markets, in emerging markets, etc. So it really helps make that business case, not just from a people point of view, but from a business point of view. And some figures from ourselves at EY, from our own global staff satisfaction survey, looking at the engagement levels of our people and diversity and inclusiveness inputs into this, looking at our own EY practices that were in the best in class, the very best, highest engagement levels versus those that were in the lowest, the lower engagement levels. The difference was showing a 7-point higher retention rates, 10 points higher revenue growth, and 6 points higher gross margin. So, we were able to go back and prove that there is a direct link between staff engagement and better business results. So, the power of having good employee data, whether it's across all different areas in SelfID, really helps you drive that business case as to why investing in this is so important. So, and that's not just LGBT specific. This is across the board. So, SelfID obviously covers so many different demographics. But we just wanted to raise some of those figures because they're quite powerful when making the case to your business leaders. So I'm going to finish that little section and let Ken take over. But I'll be back later to talk a bit more about what we're doing globally at EY. So thank you for that section.
Tim, thank you so much for sharing all of the great work at EY, and we'll look forward to hearing from you again in a little bit. And with that said, we will turn it over to Ken Werner at Chevron to talk about SelfID at Chevron. Ken?
Thanks very much. Hopefully you can hear me well. I just wanted to say, unlike my colleagues on the panel today, Chevron has not yet implemented SelfID, and I will give some highlights as to what the obstacles and the issues are as to why we are not yet implementing SelfID. So much like what Tim has talked about, the business case is pretty straightforward, that we can measure the success, good data. We are an engineering company, so data is our, I'm not sure if it's our lifeblood, but it certainly is our plasma. So we definitely want to be able to have accurate business metrics on recruitment, retention, and development of our LGBT employees, and also make sure that our LGBT leadership is in the pipeline for recruitment, retention, and development activities. We're also wanting to make sure that we have trends in comfort level for LGBT employees in the workplace, specifically even our transgender employees who are in transition, and then getting input to drive improvements to Chevron's management and metrics, and that data can be used to find the gaps to make significant and specific policy improvements. So our colorful next slide talks a little bit about our journey at Chevron, and we certainly started out with research. We don't do anything without research, and we had many resources to begin with that was at the beginning of our journey. Where are our LGBT employees? The Out and Equal SelfID Community of Practice, the Human Rights Campaign, general research that we've reviewed. So much like a thesis or a dissertation, we start with a literature review along with specific pinpointed data. Then we, in our project management process, we propose alternatives, whether they were anonymous company-wide engagement or satisfaction surveys, having a confidential self-ID portal in our employee records, having a third party do that. Those were all very carefully looked at. We benchmarked specifically with Out and Equal's 20 steps to an Out and Equal workplace as a self-assessment, as well as external benchmarking with IBM, BP, and a couple of other companies. So we have those things in our benchmarking journey. Then we included the right people in both preparing the case and reviewing the case. We have a lot of people we need to check in with at Chevron, our HR analytics team, our legal people, obviously our LGBTA employee resource group, which is PRIDE, and we have our Office of Global Diversity where I work. So there were many points of view and many key stakeholders involved. And so the next steps on the journey are to select a preferred alternative and then propose that alternative to our decision executive. So our lessons learned so far is the first key one is that what looked very simple, gee, it's just self-ID, it turned out to be much more complex and challenging than we originally had thought. It involved other departments that we hadn't even considered at the beginning, such as global security, those types of things. So the timing for an initiative like this has to be well orchestrated with not only senior management and legal, but IT, HR, as I mentioned, global security. And one of our tenets of operation at Chevron is to always involve the right people at the right time. So our global data safeguards have to be identified and addressed early in the process. And because we did so very early in the process, we realized that data threats are potentially impacting cybersecurity, and those have become more prevalent, and it's possible that it would be a cause of a data privacy breach. I just, in fact, received a mailing at home about a company that I use that their database was hacked, and that you can check your credit rating, those types of things, and we are very, very security conscious, particularly of this data. So the Chevron culture supported the planning and insights for this particular project. We're very process-oriented and quite detailed. So lastly, our next steps, we still need to have much more confidence to address the issues of data privacy, both from a corporate SAP, HR type of perspective, but also in country. the local countries when preparing expats for assignments. There is the potential possibility that the local government can require that we reveal all information that's available to our local HR. That is also a concern that we want to make sure that is not at all breachable. And then, frankly, to analyze how the self-ID data would fit into Chevron's overall HR system as well as stay protected. So our current business climate will impact the timing and the ultimate approval of the project, along with IT and security. But the bottom line is that along the way, management has been increasingly supportive of the initiative and asks us to continue to work on this initiative. Daniel?
Great. Ken, thank you so much for sharing. Sounds like a lot of great work moving forward. One small housekeeping thing before we move on. I've had a few people ask, and I should have mentioned this at the beginning, whether or not we would be sharing the slides after the webinar, and we will be sharing that information as well as the link to the recording, and that should go out in the next few days as soon as we are through. And with that said, I will now turn it over to Monica Marquez at EY. Monica, are you still with us?
Yes, sorry about that. It's the mute button trick that happens all the time. So as you heard both from Tim and from Ken, implementing self-ID is a process. A lot of research and things that are going on. But to kind of give you an idea, here at EY, who we are, we're a global professional services firm. And there's actually a typo. 200,000 plus people. This slide is actually not that old, but we have been growing quite a bit in the last few months. So you'll see it reflected in another slide. But we're also in over 150 countries. And so I think, one of the things as Tim and Ken have expressed is that there's 200,000 people that we really need to understand, how satisfied are our people, what are our people thinking, what do we need to do, and how do we service them. And so, we started thinking about the business case, and really, as Tim has pointed out, I won't really go belabor it, but it very similar to the power of good employee data driving the better business results. That was really what we kind of based or thought about. This is the business case that we need to make to senior leadership in order to get them to realize what we would be able to do with this data. And so, thinking about leveraging some of these, the research from external organizations and how, more effective teaming, higher retention rates, much more success in the market. Well, the only way that you're going to be able to really identify or minimize, retention rates and create effective teaming is to really understand your population. And a lot of the times it also, you may do a global people survey, as we have said, and you may do a global people survey, but at the end of the day, the results that you get sometimes, you want to hone in on that population. And so, most companies start, as Tim had explained, with network surveys, anonymous employee satisfaction surveys, moving to collect data via the HR systems, et cetera. We followed very much of the same historical, process here in the Americas. And we started as early as, the 2000-ish time frame. We drafted the initial version of the white paper that we ultimately distributed kind of as a community of practice through HR and through HRC and Out and Equal. And we got buy-in to proceed, but we actually in 2008 here in the Americas had a technology change in our global HR systems. So we were asked to postpone the implementation of the self-ID until we got the new system and everything had been kind of migrated over, et cetera. However, we realized that we didn't want to, that was just an issue solely in the Americas, and we didn't want to stop the rest of our organization from doing that. So our UK practice, or as Tim has mentioned, and we'll share with you later, they implemented the self-ID in 2009, and then based on a lot of the, I would say, lessons learned and the things that the processes or the obstacles that presented themselves, we really partnered with them closely and worked with them on how we proceeded here in the Americas. And so as you can see here, in the Americas, we started off, doing kind of network surveys, et cetera, but in 2008, leveraging the Global People Survey, we really took, steps to start asking some of these more LGBT-focused questions. And, they were more, do you identify as LGBT, transgender, and then if you identify, are you out at work? So that was interesting, and where we took some of that information from that 2008 Global People Survey was that in 2008, we found that our out LGBT population had an engagement and employee satisfaction equal to the general population. Our transgender population had an engagement well above the general population, and these were the out kind of LGBT individuals. However, we did find that our closeted or not out LGBT population had an engagement and employee satisfaction that was 7 percentage points lower than the general population. So that in and of itself was a very powerful kind of, data point that we could start sharing with leadership in the terms of telling them how important it would be to really associate this information to names, because it wasn't in our HR system. So as we all know, Global People surveys tend to be anonymous. They're not attributed to anybody. But at the end of the day, wouldn't we want to understand, were these our junior professionals? Were these our senior professionals? Were these some of the, other professionals that might be at, risk of retaining? So that was another way of, once you start doing it at another level like the Global People Survey, maybe that's where we kind of started talking about, let's really kind of start doing the more HR kind of tying it to the HR system. So we actually, recently were able to include this in an inclusiveness survey that HR was kind of pulling and functioning. And, we kind of leveraged the fact that we also had to go out there for disability for like regulatory reasons. But what we ended up having to do, and as you've seen, Ken and others have mentioned around security and data, we actually had to separate surveys. So we have an inclusiveness survey where we ask people to go in and self-ID and share some other information. And then we have more of an, I would say, EEO questionnaire that resides in another survey. It's not our preference, but because of security, requirements, that was the only way we were able to get it implemented. So you have to be creative in the ways that you do it, but making a case that you do need this information. And then, of course, what it really helps do is, it provides kind of it solidifies, for the LGBT population that our current support, equitable practices, it's an evolution of diversity recognition, and then you really are able to start empowering, in some cases, your LGBT groups to, sharing some of these overarching themes to help them strategize on priorities that they may be focusing on in the years to come. And so really kind of just being able to make this, a business case of how it's going to improve, and I think Tim had actually shared some of those benefits for the firm. And then ultimately, just so that you would understand, in the U.S. there is a difference in terms of, what we asked was sexual orientation and diversity. We did ask, how do you identify? LGBT, heterosexual, prefer not to answer. And then we actually, we really split out the gender identity expression question and, asked, do you identify as, or have you ever identified as a genderqueer, transgender, or gender other than the gender which you are assigned at birth? And the reason we did this is because we realized that some people may have already experienced their transition and may feel comfortable, in their current gender. So we wanted to really capture, that evolution so that we could kind of get, that idea, get a truer answer. So we were really careful on how we worded that question as well. So with that, these were some of the things that were more America's focused, as well as in our, I would say the self-ID, process. In some cases, we also look into, or we tie some of the ethnicity, when we do other research, now that it's in our HR system, where we do other research on, are there compounding challenges for multicultural LGBT professionals, et cetera. So those are things where you can start really drilling down into the information and realizing how powerful it is that a self-ID process can really start helping you evolve your D&I initiatives and really kind of feeling like you're making a more significant impact. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tim to kind of share with you all a little bit more around kind of how we launched it in the UK and some of the lessons learned, and you'll see some of the potential nuances as well that they do differently than you would in the Americas. So realizing that you do have to customize based on region.
Thanks, Monica. So it's me again, and just to reiterate then what Monica's already said about the firm, we have over 200,000 people spread over 150 countries. We have a single global HR system, and we have a biennial global people survey. So with such a huge organization spread across so many different locations with different legislative makeups, all sorts of different things, local flexibility in that is so key and so important. So our HR system is quite flexible in that even though we have the single global one, there is a large degree of customization that can happen at the local level to recognize the differences in different demographics. So ethnicity, for example, the way ethnic minorities are referred to and seen in different countries will be very, very different. So it's very difficult to have a single global measure on that, for example. You need to have the customization at local level. So that's just to give a bit of a nuance there. And I'm going to use the UK and Ireland as an example because that's the area of the firm closest to my heart and of which I'm responsible. And I'm going to focus more on the HR system, SelfID. So this is a screenshot of our HR system here in the UK showing the sexual orientation screen. And as you'll probably note, we ask the question in a slightly different way to the Americas. We have a slightly different way of breaking up the different orientations. And we don't use the word queer, for example, because in the UK there is quite a negative connotation towards that word. So research that we did when we implemented this kind of led us to not include it on there, although we have an other box that people can tick. At the moment, we don't in the UK measure gender identity, but we are in the process of adding it to the HR system, and we're going to use a question very, very similar to the Americas one. So that's going to be loaded up this year. So the UK, as Monica mentioned, we launched our self-identification on our HR system in 2009. And that not just on sexual orientation, but that was on informal flexible working, disability, ethnicity, whether you had caring responsibilities, and religion and faith. So we implemented a wide range of D&I measures into our HR system on a voluntary basis, and they all have a prefer not to say option. So we would rather, if people didn't want to answer the question, we prefer that they would click that rather than leave the question blank, because a prefer not to say response does tell you something. If a whole section of the organization is clicking prefer not to say, obviously something is happening there to mean that they don't feel comfortable. For example, whereas if it's just blank, are they too busy to fill it out? Do they not want to fill it out? Do they not know it's there? A blank thing doesn't really tell you anything, but a prefer not to say at least tells you something. When we launched our self-ID, we originally wanted to launch it a year earlier. We consulted with our staff ERG, our LGBT network, on the sexual orientation question specifically. And at the time, it was fairly new. In the UK, it was quite a new thing, and there was a lot of pushback from them at the time as to why does the firm need to know this information? We're not sure we're comfortable with you asking us this now. And so we held the project off for a year and worked very carefully with them to make sure that they understood all of the reasons why we wanted the data, the security around who was going to have access to it, what we were going to use the data for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we got them to a place where they were comfortable for us to proceed with the project, and we were consulting with the other respective ERGs as well on their different demographics. So we launched it in 2009. on the HR system, we already had the questions in our Global People Survey. Our questions closely follow the UK census categories to enable us to do mapping across our different regional locations within the UK and Ireland. Sexual orientation is not included in the, and neither is gender identity into the UK census as yet. But we're hoping in 2021 it will be. That's not confirmed yet. So those questions we used best practice advice from Stonewall, who are the Out and Equal equivalent organisation here, as to which questions to ask. And it's important when looking globally to understand that even within one country, there can be different issues and additional things that you need to monitor. So in the United Kingdom, in Northern Ireland, there is an additional reporting requirement that goes beyond the normal reporting on faith and religion. So where we just use the normal census categories across the rest of the UK. In Northern Ireland, we specifically have to monitor on the split of Catholic and Protestant people within the organisation. Because of the historical issues that have happened in Northern Ireland, there is a specific legal requirement to monitor on that particular thing just within Northern Ireland. So that's an example of just even within one legislative jurisdiction of the United Kingdom, part of the UK, we have a different additional reporting requirement. So, when you're looking globally at rolling things out, it's really important to understand if there are any requirements like that in the locations that you're dealing with. And at the time we launched the SelfID in the UK, we looked to do it in the Republic of Ireland as well. And at that time, it definitely was not a normal thing to be done in Ireland at all. And we consulted with the then Equality Authority in Ireland and their National Chamber of Commerce and said, we're looking to do monitoring. Could we quote you as saying it's best practice? And we were told at the time, yes, we think it is best practice, but politically we cannot be seen to be supportive. We cannot be seen to be supportive of this because it's not something that is normal to be seen in organisations at the time, and we don't feel ready to publicly make it best practice. However, in 2013, it was best practice. So we launched our SelfID in the Republic of Ireland as well, which was great. We had to tweak the system slightly because the Irish census is very similar to the UK one, but it has some additional, particularly around ethnicity, it has some additional things. So we updated our HR system to include those things as well. So just wanted to use the UK and Ireland as an example to show that within a fairly small little geographical region, there are lots of different issues that can apply. And when you're rolling things out, you may not be able to roll them out at the same time in all places. It can be a gradual thing. Some countries may not be in the right place. Some countries it might be illegal. And there are some countries in Europe where it's illegal to monitor on anything other than an anonymous staff survey. So you can't do it on your HR system. So you can't self-ID on your HR system. So you need to have a very good understanding of the different legislative requirements that are out there around the world. Now, I'm not going to labour too much on these next three slides because I know that you'll have access to them afterwards, so you can read them in detail. But just some of the challenges that you would face. You need to be able to identify the benefits to the individuals and make sure that they're happy with the security access levels and things around the data. So who's going to have access, what you're going to use it for. So, for example, in the UK, on gender identity, if you monitor on gender identity, once someone has got their gender recognition certificate, which enables their gender to be officially switched on systems and things, it then becomes a criminal offence for their past gender history to be disclosed. So, you have to make sure that that part of the HR system is locked tight so that nobody outside of the authorised people can have access to that, because it's potentially a criminal offence if that happens. But in general, data like this best practices, you have to make very sure that it's secure and limited to a very small group so that it's not generally available. I've already said differences across regions, understand all the differences, understand terminology differences. So, as I've just mentioned, the word queer, for example, has negative connotations in some places, and there will be other terms that you could use in some places and probably couldn't in others. Make sure you use SelfID as an opportunity to engage with all the different relevant areas around your organisation, your general counsels, your IT and technology people, your compliance people, your HR people, your D&I teams, et cetera, et cetera. And implementation, do your research, reiterating some of this stuff, you understand the local landscape, look for best practice recommendations from external organisations like Out and Equal and Stonewall in the UK and others around the world, and regulators as well, government organisations, and equality organisations. And consult, get buy-in, consult with your ERGs, consult with others around the organisation, and make sure that you have leadership buy-in, because it's very important, because if you don't have leadership buy-in right from the start, this is SelfID and implementing it can be a tough thing. So you need to have that leadership buy-in and make sure the leaders understand why you're after this and why they need to back changes to the system, and then communicate clearly to people. Why are we asking you these questions? How is it going to benefit the organisation? And why should you answer these questions? Why does the firm want to know? And then use all sorts of opportunities to encourage SelfID. So as new joiners come in, as part of the general induction process, when you're talking about diversity and why it's important to your organisation, use it as an example of something they can do straight away to help support the diversity practices of your organisation, to go on the system and fill out their details. Use specific LGBT events and things, not only to raise awareness of LGBT issues, but also as an opportunity to remind people to do their data. So the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia and Biphobia on May 17th every year, local pride events, all sorts of things. And then whenever you're talking about D&I in general or LGBT issues, or any opportunity you've got to point people at the HR system. So if they're going in to check their compensation statements, you're asking other general questions. So update, you make sure your bank details are up to date on the system. Oh, and while you're there, spend a couple of minutes doing your D&I data. Always use that as any opportunity you have to remind them. And then never underestimate the element of competition. So if you have different business units within your organisation, different business areas, why not challenge them all, challenge their leaders and say, over the next 12 months, let's see which one of you can get the highest declaration rate on the SelfID system. Encourage your people. You have the support of the diversity teams and the ERGs. Let's see, and we'll give you updates on the percentages. Obviously not who's completed data, but on the percentage levels. So never underestimate the element of competition. But yeah, that's that in a nutshell. That's me. I will hand over now to the next speaker.
Kim, thank you so much for sharing once again. And with that, we will turn it over to Annette Coffey, Global Human Resources Director for IBM.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. And it's been very interesting listening to Tim and Ken and Monica. IBM shares a lot of the same approach and methodologies that have already been shared with everybody. So let me go ahead and dive right in. We at IBM started our diversity indicator program in 2006, and like my colleagues on the phone, we did a lot of research. We gained a lot of input from within our company, and also attempted way back then to get benchmarking, but there wasn't a whole lot of self-identification back then. But what really propelled our program forward was the recognition that talent and expertise skills were our main currency. If we were going to be successful in our industry, we recognized we would need to attract and recruit and retain the best talent that we could possibly have. And so that was really an element that drove our program forward. In addition to all of the reasons that Tim and Monica have cited in terms of having the data to drive decisions around our employee engagement, our training, all of the programs in the workforce, it was really the skills and talent aspect that did launch this. Now, like my colleagues, our self-identification capability is available in our HR management system. And being a 460,000 employee company, over 107 countries, we do have more than one HR management system, but we do have the self-identification in those systems. We're covering approximately 90% of our IBM employee population, and the reason it's not 100% is a reason that Ken cited earlier. In countries where we know homosexuality can be penalized by any number of means, our employee safety is number one. And so if there is even a chance of a country demanding IBM turning over employee data, we will not collect data in that country solely for our employees' protection. So very important, as Tim was pointing out, as you think about self-identification across your company, careful consideration needs to be made across the different regions. Obviously, the government's regulatory requirements, data privacy requirements, security of the data was profoundly a focus area for IBM. And again, the protection of the employee data, the protection of the employee safety and security was a primary element in the research and business case we put forward when we started the program. And just like you've heard from the other speakers, we really saw an opportunity to leverage this data for our LGBT population to understand who that constituency was and is, what the needs were, so we could do a better job as a human resources organization, as a company, to communicate and network, mentor all of the different opportunities that we take for granted in a company like E&Y, like IBM, like Chevron, but really make sure that we were reaching and touching and engaging our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual employees to make sure that we were providing opportunities for those folks to enjoy and exploit the same opportunities that their heterosexual colleagues were experiencing. So through leadership seminars and diversity training, a number of opportunities are given to our LGBT community. And I could spend a lot of time talking about how we're using the data in a variety of ways, basically echoing what Tim and Monica has shared, but it has been hugely beneficial to our bottom line, hugely beneficial to attracting and retaining the top talent regardless of sexual orientation, gender identification, and diversity is at the cornerstone of IBM's long-standing 104-year-old history. We're lucky that our founder was a very sensitized person, and from the beginning he established our company diversity policies at the very beginning, and it's been a monumental anchor and cornerstone to everything we do in IBM. The other thing I'll say before I flip ahead to the next slide is that this data that we do collect through our management system is protected, and there is only, even having 460,000 people, there are literally only a couple of people that have access to this data. So I wanted to give you an example of how closely held and protected. It was more of a concern back in 2006 when we were first starting how the data would be used, if it could be used against anyone. And since that time, those and the world, society has moved on, those concerns have lessened, but there are people that we have, there are employees that have identified as LGBT, but they prefer their manager or nobody else to know about it. They want to be counted because they understand the benefit of that data in use through IBM programs, but they're not at a place in their career, in their life, where they feel that they can share. And this goes back into what Tim was saying about country-specific norms, religious, historical reasons, certainly not for company reasons, but there's many issues, many different elements that come into play. So we want to honor anybody who wants to identify themselves to us in the system but does not want to be open or out. So we have all types of responses in that way. I've touched on a few items on this slide already. And one of the key things that we're focusing on right now is how we advance the careers of our lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual employees. And we have the ability to match our self-identification data with our succession planning. So our high potential employees are matched, or the LGBT data is matched with this. And so we have the ability to really focus on those high potential. And from that, we're able to provide to those individuals a very targeted and specific mentoring program to ensure they are receiving visibility, opportunities to excel in their career, and be able to expand their leadership opportunities and capabilities. So this is a huge focus for us right now, and as the others pointed out, it's all about visibility. And we, on a regular basis, have reviews of our high potential LGBT employees with the highest levels of our business to keep that visibility going, to provide more opportunities, and to ensure that everyone in our company understands that this constituency, just like all of our other resource groups, our diversity groups, play an important part. It's not about who you are, where you came from. It's all about the skill, the expertise, and the talent you're going to bring to the table, but understanding the different needs, the different requirements, as my colleagues have said on this call, is instrumental in achieving our business results. So I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, so let me pass it back to you, Daniel, to see if there are any questions we haven't yet answered.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, Annette. Yes, we are right at the top of the hour, so there are a few questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can. So first question will go to Ken. It's from Jennifer. She's wondering, how long has Chevron's work been progressing on SelfID?
Thank you for the question. We've been working on it for plus or minus 3 years so far.
Okay. The next question is from Dana, and I think this would be an open question. Are there examples of similar data collected with other employee groups, i.e. veterans?
This is Pat Coffey. I did see that question, and yes, we at IBM do collect. We have a diversity indicator, self-identification, for example, for people with disabilities. May not be visible, but have a disability that they want to declare. So yes, in IBM we do have the ability to capture data on other diversity groups.
And this is Ken Warner at Chevron. We have a comparable self-identification tab in our HR database, again, for both disability and veterans.
And Toby was asking during...
Go ahead. To say the same at EY, we have we monitor or we self-ID on quite a wide range of different diversity demographics, and those, as I mentioned in my talk, those will differ slightly depending on which part of the world you're in, and the definitions used might be slightly different. But we do across quite a wide range of different things.
And same here in the Americas for EY. We basically, the SelfID survey isn't necessarily just LGBT focused. We also answer all of the other kind of underrepresented groups, minority group questions as well.
And Toby was asking during Monica's section, is there an affinity group involved with EY's Self-ID campaign? Has it been affected? And if so, what did they do that was most effective?
So yes, so when we kind of rolled this out, and as I mentioned, we used to collect this data, informal surveys that the networks used to do, but then once we started kind of moving it to a more formal HR kind of system of a Self-ID campaign, we realized that, one, I want to piggyback on what Annette was mentioning, that it was extremely important to make sure when you're communicating these surveys and these and asking people to fill this information as to how secure the data really is going to be and how it's going to be used and who actually has access. So very similar to what Annette mentioned, here in the Americas, as we are a 200,000 plus organization, but there are only 6 people across the Americas that actually have access to this data in terms of name by name and identifying people. And so being very careful on how we identified that. So that said, it poses an issue when you still roll it out. There are some people who may not read that message or something along those lines. So what we did start in December of 2014 was a campaign of sorts that we really kind of partnered with our affinity network groups that we basically branded I Count. And so what it means, basically was that I support inclusiveness at EY, and in having people the networks encouraging people to complete the firm's voluntary kind of D&I survey for all of the Americas professionals across the board, and sharing with them that the surveys, were basically regarding to disability status, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, caregiving status, and professional network involvement. And part of the reason was explaining that, one, there are some requirements, regulatory requirements to capture disability, veteran, and minority information, but also, the other questions were so that we could further understand the demographics of our people and better determine how to support them. So what we did is we basically kind of shared on the best practices in terms of the I Count campaign, and basically asking all of the network leaders to kind of craft an email to their membership, or anytime they had a town hall meeting, to encourage people to do so and provide the links, and then as well as asking them to change their a message on their Outlook stationery at the very bottom, making under their email signature, encouraging people to basically self-ID or I Count, adding the link status. Those were some other, important ways for that when, we also have an internal kind of social networking social media, it's called Yammer. And so we were asking people to put that on their status, kind of like I Count. When you went into the survey and did that, make sure you were letting people know that you went in and filled it out. And so hopefully your network or people will see that, and it'll drive some of that. And then just creating challenges in some cases of trying to get people to get their networks to go in and do the I Count. Now, it's a tough road, I will tell you. I mean, initially when we rolled it out in December 2014, when we checked our numbers a couple of weeks after, we really only had a 7% response rate. But we are a professional service firm, tax and audit, and so it was during kind of really busy season, that January, kind of once January kicks in, people are very focused on work. So we are kind of relaunching or reigniting this I Count campaign now in the spring and into the summer, as we know that people have a little bit more time to kind of, say, okay, I'll take a few minutes to fill out this survey. So we've really leveraged that campaign and the networks to really try to get it out, because to be quite honest, that's probably a large constituency, or the core population that we're trying to get this information from.
Thank you, Monica. So we have a lot more questions coming in, but I do want to be conscious of the fact that we are right at 1 o'clock. So what we will do is go ahead and follow up with those questions individually, but I would like to give each speaker an opportunity to make some closing comments. Tim, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Thanks, Daniel. I mean, I guess I don't want to rehash my whole presentation again, but like just to reiterate, when you're rolling this out, do your research, make sure you understand the issues, not just in the home country, but also when you're rolling out globally, really understand the issues out there in the different regions and the different legislative areas, and do your engagement. Make sure you bring your ERGs on board. Make sure you make the case as to why you're collecting the data, how it's secured, how it's going to be used, etc., and do something with it. Don't just collect it for the sake of it. If you're doing this, putting all this effort into collecting this data, make sure that you're actually using it to help drive change in your organization. Otherwise, there's no point. So, use it to actually affect change.
Thank you, Tim. Ken?
Yes, thank you. What I would just say is be aware of the things that pop up while you're not planning for them. We certainly found out a lot of things that we hadn't anticipated. It seemed, again, so very easy when we started out, just ask the question. But it became much more complicated, and many more stakeholders sort of had to come into the fray. So be aware, be open, and be vigilant.
Thank you, Ken. Annette?
Just to echo what everybody said, the business case is critical, and ensuring that employee data and employee safety is first in mind. It's a compelling story, and hopefully our joint session has provided a lot of ideas for those of you who do not have self-identification yet. The proof is in the pudding, as they say, and the data and employee safety at the top of that will make for a compelling case to advance your cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette. And Monica?
So, finally, I would just say, I think Tim kind of touched on it. The most important thing is, you do put a lot of work into this process. Really do leverage that data, and so be thinking about how you're going to use it beyond what you're sharing with the groups that you're asking to fill out, but really thinking about who are the key stakeholders, who are the leadership, who are the people that you really need to inform of these the findings that you're identifying in collecting this data. But don't forget about senior kind of network champions, employee network champions, and kind of some of the maybe more senior steering committee leaders that you share. And you have to be careful with what you share, but you do share enough information to empower them to really kind of focus and target and help shift their priorities so that it can help you close those gaps. So thinking about, there are certain things that you can do from an HR perspective in terms of, career development programs and highest performing, identifying those highest performing people and supporting them. But a lot of the times it's only a small slice of that population that you can touch through these nomination programs. The networks are going to really be able to broadcast a lot of these changes or help you push these changes through. So make sure that you are leveraging that information to kind of empower them. But again, remembering what Annette had said, there is, you have to be very, very careful on the security and kind of the confidentiality. So, when we do it, we're very careful to just share it orally with a few key people.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank all of the speakers for sharing your time today, as well as insight to SelfID at your workplaces. And I would also like to take this opportunity to remind everyone that Out and Equal does have a SelfID community of practice resource on our Salesforce community, and that's a great place for you to access resources and files, to collaborate with others, share best practices, and of course to stay connected. I'd like to also remind everybody that the Out and Equal Workplace Summit will take place in Dallas, October 6th through 8th, with our Leadership Day on October 5th, and our early bird registration rates will end at the end of the month on May 31st. So go ahead and get yourself registered. It will be an amazing event. And I'd like to thank everybody for participating and dialing in today. Our next town call will be on Wednesday, June 17th at 12 p.m., where we will talk about the benefits of keeping a domestic partner program in the wake of same-sex marriage across the United States. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We will be sharing this slide deck after the presentation. and there'll be a brief survey right after the town call, and we would love to hear your feedback. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your Thursday.